Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever found yourself in a season where it feels like everyone and everything has left you, where the people you thought you could count on have faded away and the path you're on seems lonely and quiet? I want to tell you something today. Those seasons of isolation, those times when it's just you and God, are some of the most powerful moments in your life, because sometimes isolation isn't just a dry, empty desert. It's a time of divine preparation. It's a sign that God is working behind the scenes, readying you for a blessing you can't even see yet. Isolation is not a punishment, it's a process. You see, when God is preparing to bless you, He often pulls you aside. He pulls you away from the noise, away from the distractions, away from people's expectations. He separates you not to harm you, but to prepare you. Just like a seed planted deep in the ground, there's a season of darkness and quiet. But in that hidden place, growth happens. Roots dig deep, foundations strengthen. So if you're feeling isolated, maybe, just maybe it's because you're being prepared to break through, to rise up, to step into a blessing that will require a foundation strong enough to carry it. In isolation, you grow. You reflect. You learn things about yourself that you'd never see if you were surrounded by people and distractions. In this season, God is pruning you. He's cutting away old habits, old thoughts, and old ways of being that no longer serve who you're becoming. He's refining you, preparing you to receive what's next. And let me tell you, blessings carry weight. With every blessing comes responsibility, a responsibility you might not be ready to carry without a little preparation. This season of isolation isn't empty, it's filled with purpose. It's shaping you, strengthening you, and stretching you so that when God opens the door, you'll be ready to step through it with confidence and courage. And let's talk about faith. In a season of isolation, God reminds you who your true source is. Without the voices of others to affirm or validate you, you learn to listen to the voice of God. You learn to lean on Him, not on people. You build a foundation of faith that's so strong, it doesn't waver when things get tough. In this season, your faith is fortified. You develop a dependency on God that nothing in this world can shake. And that, my friends, is the kind of faith that moves mountains, the kind of faith that attracts blessings you can't even imagine. So I say to you, trust this season of isolation. Trust that God's hand is in it. Just because you're alone doesn't mean you're abandoned. God has set you apart because He's got something greater in store. This quiet season, it's the calm before the breakthrough, the quiet before the elevation. Keep walking, keep growing, and keep trusting. Because on the other side of this isolation is a blessing tailor-made for you, a blessing that's bigger, brighter, and more beautiful than anything you could have ever dreamed. Isolation has a purpose. It's not an accident, not a punishment, but rather a carefully designed period that can shape and prepare you in ways you may not understand right now. When God pulls you into a season of isolation, He's not doing it to hurt you or to leave you empty. He's drawing you away from the distractions, away from the noise, so that He can work on you in a deep and meaningful way. Often He's calling you to be set apart so that He can build you up, strengthen you, and reveal things to you that you might miss if you were surrounded by the world's endless chatter. You see, we live in a world filled with constant noise voices telling you who to be, what to do, how to live. And in the middle of all that, God sometimes has to step in and say, come with me for a while. I need you to be alone so you can hear my voice more clearly. In this isolation, it's as if He's stripping away the layers, removing all the filters that other people in the world have put on you so you can see yourself through His eyes. And in those quiet moments, in that solitude, there's a chance to rediscover who you really are, who He created you to be. Isolation becomes a mirror, showing you what needs healing, what needs to grow, and what needs to change. It's not always easy to look, but it's essential. When we think of isolation, we might think of being left out, being abandoned, or even being forgotten. But let me tell you this, there is no greater lie. Isolation, when it's led by God, is one of the most profound blessings, because it's here that you discover strength within yourself that you didn't even know existed. It's here that you find resilience and courage that were lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to be tested, to be refined. In this quiet place, you begin to understand that solitude is not emptiness, it's fullness. It's God's way of filling you with His presence so deeply that you no longer crave validation from anyone else. Think of the great men and women of faith. Many of them had seasons where they walked alone, seasons where God pulled them away to refine them, to test them, to strengthen them. Moses spent years in the desert before he was ready to lead his people. David spent time in the wilderness before he became king. Even Jesus himself went into the wilderness alone to prepare for his purpose. Each of these journeys was marked by isolation, by a time of separation, and yet each one led to something greater, a greater purpose, a greater calling, and a greater blessing. Isolation was not a detour, it was the necessary preparation for the greatness that lay ahead. So when you find yourself alone, feeling like you're in the desert, know that God has a reason. He's doing something within you. He's preparing you not just for the blessing itself, but to be able to handle that blessing, to carry it with wisdom and grace. He's making you strong enough to stand on your own, to walk forward without needing the applause or validation of others. And when He brings you out, you won't just have the blessing, you'll have the maturity, the strength, and the character to sustain it. You'll be ready for the next level, not just in your life, but in your purpose, your faith, and your relationship with Him. This time of isolation is a journey, one where God is taking you step by step towards something bigger, something greater. And though it may feel lonely, remember that He's with you every step of the way, working in ways you may not yet understand, but that you'll look back on with awe and gratitude. So embrace this season. Trust that there is a purpose in the isolation, a purpose that is leading you to a destiny filled with His blessings, His purpose, and His grace. Isolation is often misunderstood. Too many people see it as a lonely, barren place, a time of silence and separation. But let me tell you, isolation can be a season rich with purpose, a season of growth and refinement orchestrated by God to mold you into the person you were always meant to be. When you're pulled into a place of solitude, don't resent it. Don't rush it. Recognize it as a sacred opportunity for transformation. Think about this: a diamond, before it becomes something of brilliance and worth, spends time in the depths under pressure, hidden from the world. That is where its transformation begins. In the same way, God sometimes needs to pull us into the depths of isolation, away from the distractions, away from the voices of others, and even away from our own comfort zones. He knows that in the quiet, in the stillness, He can shape us. He can cut away the parts of us that no longer serve His purpose. It's in this season that He refines us, just like that diamond in the rough. In isolation, we're given the chance to look inward, to confront things we might have been avoiding. Maybe it's a fear, maybe it's a habit, or maybe it's a way of thinking that has held us back. Whatever it is, isolation gives us the space to deal with it. God isn't just interested in giving us blessings, He's interested in making us strong enough to carry them. And for that, sometimes we need to be pulled aside, stripped of distractions, and refined from the inside out. We can't rush the process because growth requires patience. Strength requires endurance, and transformation requires surrender. In this quiet season, God is teaching us to rely on Him in ways we might never have before. When you're isolated, you learn that your strength, your wisdom, your guidance, it all comes from Him. Without the crutches of constant support from others, we learn to lean fully on God. And let me tell you, there's a power in that kind of faith. When your strength comes from a source that never fails, you become unshakable. You learn to draw on a power that doesn't fluctuate with circumstances. That's what happens in isolation. We're given time to build a foundation so strong that when the blessings come, when the responsibility comes, we'll be ready to carry it with confidence and resilience. Now, isolation also prunes us. It cuts away the old parts of us that we no longer need, parts that can't go where we're headed. Maybe it's an attitude, maybe it's a dependency, maybe it's a habit that has held you back. God uses isolation as a time of pruning because He wants to bring out the best in you. Just as a gardener trims a plant, removing dead branches so that new life can grow, God is pruning your spirit. And though it may feel painful in the moment, remember that each cut is purposeful. Each part of you that is removed makes room for something better, something stronger. Isolation is a sacred process. It may feel uncomfortable, even lonely at times, but in that discomfort, we are being prepared for the blessings that are waiting for us. When the time is right, when we've gone through the fire and come out stronger, when we've learned to rely fully on God and trust in His timing, then we'll be ready. Ready for the opportunities, ready for the relationships, ready for the blessings that God has had in store for us all along. So if you find yourself in a season of isolation, don't despise it. Don't rush through it. Embrace it. This is your time of growth. This is your time of refinement. This is God preparing you to receive all that He has promised. Let the isolation work within you. Let it strengthen you, shape you, and refine you into the person you were always meant to be. Because when you come out of this season, you'll emerge transformed, ready to step boldly into the destiny that awaits you. Building faith and dependency on God is one of the greatest transformations we can experience during seasons of isolation. When you find yourself alone without the familiar voices and support systems you've relied on, you begin to realize just how much you've leaned on things other than God. In that quiet, lonely space, the distractions fade away and it's just you face to face with your own spirit and with God. It's in these moments that your faith begins to grow, to deepen, to transform in ways you may never have thought possible. Imagine for a moment what it's like to truly depend on God, not just to say you trust Him, but to live it. When everything else falls away and you're left with nothing but your faith, you begin to understand that He's been there all along, ready to carry you, ready to catch you when you feel like you're falling. You see, this journey of faith isn't about the big moments where everyone can see. It's about the quiet, private moments when you're faced with doubt, fear, and uncertainty, and still choose to believe. In these moments, you learn to rely on God as your source, your anchor, and your guide. And when you come through, you realize just how strong, how resilient, and how powerful faith can be. When you're in isolation, God isn't trying to strip you down or leave you empty. He's building you up from within. You might feel weak, but He's strengthening you. You might feel lost, but He's guiding you, teaching you to walk by faith and not by sight. It's in this time alone that your faith is fortified. You begin to experience God in ways you didn't know were possible, because without distractions, you're free to hear His voice more clearly, to feel His presence more deeply, and to see His hand at work in ways you might have overlooked before. You realize that He's not just an idea, not just a concept you read about. He's real and He's personal. And in your isolation, He's calling you to lean on Him like never before. In those moments of solitude, you're learning to trust God's timing. Even when it feels like everything's at a standstill. You're learning to rely on His provision, even when the future looks uncertain. You're learning to believe in His purpose for your life, even when the path ahead seems dark. You see, dependency on God isn't just about asking Him for help in times of need. It's about recognizing that He is your foundation, your sustainer, and your provider in every season, especially the quiet ones. In isolation, you come to realize that He is enough, that He's always been enough, and that with Him you can stand strong no matter what life brings. And here's the beautiful part: this faith, this dependency you're building, it's not just for the season you're in. God is preparing you for what's ahead. He's equipping you with a faith that will sustain you in the blessings to come, in the challenges to come, in the dreams He's placed on your heart. Because, my friend, when you're able to lean on God in the quiet, hidden places of life, you'll be able to stand firm when life throws its storms at you. You'll have a faith that isn't swayed by circumstance, a faith that isn't weakened by hardship. Instead, you'll have a faith that is rooted deeply, a dependency on God that nothing in this world can shake. So this season of isolation, it's not meant to break you, it's meant to build you. It's meant to bring you closer to the one who knows your heart, the one who sees your journey, and the one who's preparing you for a future greater than you can imagine. Every quiet moment, every lonely night, every prayer spoken in solitude is laying a foundation of faith and dependency on God that will carry you into the blessings He's got prepared. So hold on, keep the faith, and trust that God is with you, shaping you, molding you, and leading you into a future filled with His presence and His promise. Trusting that greater things are coming is not always easy, especially when you're sitting in silence, facing an empty room, and feeling like your prayers have been met with more questions than answers. But this right here is where faith steps in. This is where you lean, not on what you see or feel, but on the assurance of what's to come. Because often the greatest breakthroughs come from the quietest moments. It's in those still, seemingly empty spaces that God is moving, orchestrating something powerful, something beyond what we can understand. In this season, it may feel like you're waiting in the shadows, watching others move forward while you're still and wondering why. But remember, even in what looks like a standstill, God is working. He is laying the foundation for something greater than you can imagine. What looks like isolation now is the preparation ground for elevation. Because here's the truth: the foundation must be deepened before a building can be raised. And right now, God is digging deep into your heart, building a foundation that can handle the weight of the blessing that's on the way. He's not holding you back. He's preparing you to go forward stronger, wiser, and more equipped than ever before. Trusting that greater things are coming means holding on when the path seems unclear, when you're not sure what's next, and when the answers seem far away. It's easy to trust when everything is going your way, but it's in these seasons of stillness, these moments of uncertainty, that your trust in Him becomes real. And sometimes it's in that solitude that we realize we've been holding on to things that aren't meant to come with us into the next season. We start to see that God has been pruning, removing distractions and breaking down barriers so that we can walk unhindered into what He has set before us. And make no mistake, He's not preparing small things for you. God doesn't deal in halfway blessings or partial breakthroughs. When He promises greater, He means beyond what you've dreamed, beyond what you think you deserve, and beyond what you think you're capable of. He's not just preparing you for blessings you can manage. He's preparing you for blessings that will require you to grow, to stretch, and to trust even more deeply. What He has planned is bigger than what you see today. And while you may not have all the answers right now, the delay you feel is not a denial, it's a design. A divine design setting you up for blessings that are worth the wait. So trust in this season. Trust that greater things are coming, because they are. This time of solitude and preparation is not wasted. God is not done, and He hasn't forgotten you. Every prayer, every tear, every silent moment has been heard. Greater things are coming. Believe it, expect it, and prepare to walk into it. Because when God is involved, He exceeds our expectations, delivering blessings that are pressed down, shaken together, and running over. All you have to do is trust, stand firm, and be ready to receive. So as you stand in the quiet of this season, as you walk through the silence, remember that it is not a sign of abandonment, it's a sign of preparation. God is not done with you. He is not ignoring your prayers. He is setting you up for something greater, something beyond what you could have imagined. And when that blessing arrives, it will be bigger, stronger, and more fulfilling than anything you could have dreamed. Trust that greater things are coming. Trust that every moment of waiting, every season of isolation, every unanswered prayer is working together for your good. You are being shaped, refined, and prepared to carry the weight of the blessings ahead. So hold on, stay faithful, and keep your heart open, because God's plan for your life is greater than you can see in this moment. Your breakthrough is near. Keep trusting, keep believing, and get ready for what's coming. The best is yet to come.